quite a few commissions over the past couple of years that I've been making dice, and I find it really rewarding to take an idea out of someone else's head and to make it a reality for them. But all that said, I know it's kind of daunting to start a new anything, so in this video I'm going to take you through how I do commissions and hopefully break it down a little bit, give you an idea of what to expect, and if you're planning to start commissions yourself, hopefully this will be useful to you. So I'm going to break this down into some easier to follow steps in the process to help. So, step 1, setting up your commissions. So before people can commission from you, you're going to need to make sure that you're prepared to do those commissions, whatever it is. You have, the materials that you're going to need for what you're going to offer. And then they need to know that you have commissions available. So here's the listing I have on my website for a set of custom dice. So even if you don't have your own website, it's going to be important to let people know what you're offering, what you have available, the idea of the cost. So you're going to want examples of your past work. So I started with photos of pre-made sets. So if you draw, you can just see things you've drawn already. Just things that you think would highlight your skill the best. You're going to want to let people know what is included, what options you have available. You can get an idea of the things I can do from the photos, obviously. But I've also listed some examples of things that I can do. And I made sure to highlight the more unique things that I can do, like handmade inclusions, that sort of stuff. Depending on what you do, telling people what is available could just be a list of the services you provide, a list of the programming languages you know. It's going to be dependent upon the medium that you're working in. So I also make sure to include information like the fact that people get up to 2 free repours since I make dice, at which point they'll have to choose between the 3 sets, that everything I made is homemade and might have minor imperfections to it, and that I retain the rights to all of the designs that I make, so I can sell those designs again at my discretion. It's best to just be upfront about all that stuff. You're also going to want to let people know rough prices. I know with custom stuff sometimes it's hard to estimate about how much time it's going to take you and materials and that sort of stuff, but most people are going to want to know about how much things are going to cost up front. So take into account what the person wants, how much time it's going to take you. I have my commissions broken down into 3 tiers at different price points of like simple, standard, and complex, but I know that that's not going to work for everybody. More complicated requests should cost more because that's going to take more time to make and design. Also, make sure you are charging more for custom pieces than you are for your pre-made pieces, because while commissions and making custom stuff is fun, it's a lot more work. So make sure you're pricing accordingly. So also when setting up commissions, I found it useful to set a cap on how many commissions I would take at once. I set the cap at 5, but I do that so I can make sure that I have time to finish everything and that I can keep track of everything, because there's lots of different steps in the process and it takes some organization. All right, step 2. Discussing and designing. So this is the point where people are actually reaching out to you to get commissions. I'm going to be using a commission throughout this video that I did recently as an example. So in this example, I got a Discord message from someone that I had done commission work for before. More often for commissions, I'll get emails or people reach out on social media. How you want to communicate with whoever's commissioning from you is up to you. But you will want some way to communicate with the people that you're going to be doing work for. So when I'm working with someone to figure out what it is they're looking for, I'll often rephrase what it is that they said into new words to make sure we're both on the same page. So in this commission example, I went and sent a photo of a different set of dice that they had mentioned to make sure it was the set of dice that they were talking about, and made sure to mention all of the colors that they had mentioned. That's a lot of mentions. They had mentioned some colors, so I made sure to include those in my rephrasing to make sure that that was actually what they wanted. So once we had gone back and forth a little bit and discussed specific glitters and colors and hashed out the details, I compiled all my notes into a Word document. I have a Word document with all of the commissions that I've ever done in it with my notes for each one on their own page. But I would suggest having some way to keep track of all those notes in case you get more later. For example, with dice, quite often we will decide on a color for the numbers later. It's nice to be able to group that information with the information that I already have to make sure everything is happening. Once we figured out what it was that they wanted, I gave them a price. In this case for me, since I do kind of a tiered thing, it fell under the standard option. And then sometimes I don't have specific materials that are needed. If it is more generic or it's inexpensive, I'll sometimes just source those myself. So if I need like red mica powder, which I can use for all sorts of dice later on, I'll just get that. But if it's more specific to the commission or if it's going to be more expensive, I will usually have the person purchase whatever it is and then have it shipped to me. This does also have the added benefit of letting them choose exactly what they want. So in the case of this commission, the person wanted gold dragonfly-shaped glitter, and I helped them look. I'll usually help people look for stuff like that, but ultimately I left it up to them to get exactly what they wanted. Once we have the design figured out, we have all of our notes written down, we have all of our materials, we can move on to step 3, starting the commission. This is the point where we actually start working on the final product. There's a bit of build-up to it. So how long things will take, the materials you're using, that sort of stuff is obviously going to vary depending on what it is you're making. But no matter what the project is, your best friend is going to be communication. This is something I've had to learn over time, how to actually communicate with people and make sure that you're communicating with people. But it is also something that I have had people mention to me in as far as commissions go that they really appreciate. So I like to live stream while working on commissions, which can have immediate feedback. I can get information from the person who's commissioning from me immediately. We can make changes on the fly. But, if you don't want to live stream, you obviously don't need to. Most people don't. But I would suggest using whatever communication you have with the person, so if it's email or social media, keeping them in the loop. So if you're running late on something, let them know why. Ask as you go if things are shaping up as intended. That way you can fix things early before putting a whole bunch of work in. Which actually leads me to the next step. Step 4, revisions. So revisions actually happen alongside working on the commission. It's not really an after thing, it's kind of a continuous thing. It could happen more than once. It's all going to depend on how you have things set up and what you're making. I make dice. I make sure to send photos of every step of the process, for the most part, to the person that I'm making them for. So there's a lot of reasons that it works well to give lots of information to the person who's ordering from you. It keeps them feeling like they're part of the process. It gives them an idea of the process and how much time and energy and skill is going into what you're making. But the big thing is, it is much easier to start over from the beginning before you've put a whole bunch of time and energy into something. Going back to the commission example, one of the first steps in that set was to pour a set of dice blanks. Here's the first set of blanks that I poured. Obviously they didn't end up in the dice. And I felt like they were a little bit yellow. They're kind of yellowish, not quite green enough. We had talked about them being green. So I reached out to the person who commissioned from me to ask what they thought. Unless something is glaringly wrong, something like didn't turn out at all, I'll usually still send photos to the person that ordered from me in case they like them. Like, just because it's not exactly what they were looking for originally, maybe they'll like them better. It doesn't hurt to send it over and say, hey, what do you think? But in this case, they agreed with me that they were just a little bit too yellow. They weren't quite green enough. So I went back to the drawing board a little bit, changed some of the gold glitter on the inside a little bit, because we discussed that as well, and repoured them. So yeah, then that process kind of repeats. So I went back and reported those, sent more photos, got more feedback. I allow 2 possible repours so that this doesn't continue forever. You don't want the revisions to continue forever. It's good to set up those ground rules from the beginning before you ever start working on the commission. That way you'll actually know when to stop, which is actually our last step. Step 5, finishing and delivering the final product. So I wasn't quite sure what to say for this section, since how you're going to deliver things is going to be so dependent upon what you're making or what you're doing for the person. So I asked a friend who does drawing commissions what they thought I should put for this section, and their word of advice was, and I quote, "Know when you're done," which they also described as a call-out post to themselves. But I thought that was sound advice. So with the dice from my example, I knew I was done because I had gotten through all of the steps for making a set of dice that I have for myself, and I reached out to the person who ordered them and said, hey, what do you think of these? Is this what you want? And they said yes. It's done. Sometimes you just have to decide that something is done. You can keep fixing and tweaking things forever, but keep in mind the amount that you're being paid, the time frame that you need to be working in, and what the person who is ordering from you will consider done. So I mentioned it before, but ultimately what it all comes down to is communication. So make sure you're on the same page as the person at the start. Make sure you're checking in with them throughout the process. Even if it's just sending a message like, hey, I'm gonna be polishing your dice. It's gonna be a couple weeks until you hear from me. That's good. Let people know what to expect, what the time frame's gonna be like. They will appreciate it. And if something changes or something's taking more time than expected, let the person know. People are typically understanding of that sort of stuff as long as you reach out. People are gonna be much more understanding if you reach out and let them know than thinking that you have taken their money and ghosted them. So there's probably plenty of other little things that I've forgotten to mention. So if you do commissions or you get a lot of commissioned work, please feel free to leave your advice for other people down in the comments. And if you're thinking of starting commissions or you've just started commissions and you want to get a second opinion on something, feel free to leave that down in the comments too. And probably I'll try to answer things, but maybe other people will have some ideas as well. I'll see you guys later. Bye! I've done a lot of commissions.